The other day, my grandson asked me why I keep so much stuff. It was an innocent question, the kind only a child can ask without a trace of accusation, just pure curiosity. I opened my mouth to give him an answer, a simple explanation from a grandfather to his grandson, and nothing came out. The words just weren't there. I stood completely still, right in the middle of my own living room, a room I've walked through 10,000 times, and I felt like a stranger. My gaze fell upon a cardboard box that has occupied the same corner by the window for 9 years. 9. It's become part of the landscape of this house, a silent, dusty monument to I don't even know what. I just stared at its taped-up flaps, the dust so thick it has its own texture, and I had absolutely nothing to say. The silence in that room was louder than any answer I could have given. And you know what's worse? The real, honest truth of it all? I don't even know what's in the box. It's a strange thing, isn't it? To have a piece of your own life sealed away right there in front of you, but you treat it like it doesn't exist. A little mystery you've chosen to live with every single day. I wonder if you know that feeling. Tell me in the comments, what's the one object in your house you never open but also never throw away? Just the name of it. A suitcase, a folder, that one drawer in the kitchen. Because in this video, I'm going to tell you what I found when I finally took a blade to the packing tape on that 9-year-old box. And I can tell you right now, it wasn't what I expected. It wasn't about the forgotten photographs or the old tax receipts I assumed were inside. The discovery wasn't inside the box at all. It was in the act of opening it. It was about finally understanding what had kept it sealed shut for nearly a decade. And that realization, well, it started to change everything for me. It started with a simple request from my daughter, Catherine, an old insurance policy she needed for some paperwork. It's in my office, I told her with a confidence I hadn't earned in years. We walked down the hall, and the moment I pushed the door open, I felt the lie in my throat. It didn't open all the way, blocked by a leaning tower of National Geographic magazines from the 90s. The air inside was thick, heavy with the smell of dust and decaying paper, a scent I used to find comforting, like a library. Now it just smelled stagnant. We waded in. Every surface was a testament to indecision. My hands, digging through files that felt as brittle as autumn leaves, were soon covered in a fine gray film. I pulled on a filing cabinet drawer, and it screamed in protest, jammed shut by something I'd forgotten long ago. The silence between us grew heavier than the piles of paper. I kept murmuring, "It's here, I know it's here," but the room just seemed to swallow the words. I could feel my heart beating a little too fast, a tight band of pressure across my chest. It wasn't about the document anymore, it was about the search itself, this slow, suffocating excavation of my own neglect. Finally, she just stopped. She let out a soft sigh, a sound that wasn't of frustration but of surrender. "It's okay, Dad. We'll find it another time." But she didn't leave. She stood in the doorway, one hand resting on the frame, and she just looked. Not at me, but at the room. Her eyes scanned the landscape of my life's clutter. The teetering stacks of books threatening to collapse, the shoe boxes spilling unsorted receipts onto the floor, the old desktop computer from a decade ago sitting silently under the desk like a tombstone. And in her gaze, I saw it. It wasn't anger. It wasn't disappointment. It was something so much worse. It was fear, a quiet, profound fear. In that moment, I understood she wasn't worried about a piece of paper. She was worried about me. She saw her father, the man who once managed vast warehouses and complex schedules, buried alive in his own office, drowning in a sea of yesterday. And I realized with a cold certainty that settled deep in my stomach that the thing I was truly about to lose wasn't an insurance policy. It was my daughter's image of me as a man who was still here, still present, still capable. That look in Catherine's eyes, it made me think of my brother-in-law, Walter. He's a good man, 78 now, and his house is what he calls a historical archive. I call it a tomb. The last time I visited, I watched him navigate the narrow pathways carved through his living room. He stopped by a tall stack of yellowed newspapers from the late 80s, the twine holding them together so brittle it looked like it might turn to dust. He gave the top paper a gentle pat, a soft, almost unconscious caress, like you would a sleeping dog. "This still has good life in it," he murmured, more to himself than to me. "Lots of good articles in here." He does that with everything. The toaster with the broken lever, the lawnmower that hasn't started in a decade. He pats them, defends their potential, and standing there in the quiet, dusty air of his museum of good intentions, I saw the man I was just one small step away from becoming, a curator of a life that no one else could enter. That night I couldn't get the look in Catherine's eyes out of my head, or the image of Walter patting that stack of dead newspapers like a beloved pet. For the first time, I didn't see my office as just a messy room or a personal failing. I saw it for what it truly was, a fortress I had built brick by brick out of papers and books and forgotten things, a fortress designed to keep the present moment out, to keep me safely barricaded in a past I could no longer change. And I realized you don't fight a fortress by tidying up the battlements. You have to understand why you built it in the first place. I knew then that this wasn't going to be a project of cleaning, but of translation. I had to learn to read the language of my own neglect. I had to stop seeing my things as just things and start seeing them as questions I had refused to answer for decades. And that night, lying there in the quiet dark, I decided I was finally ready to start asking. The first thing I did wasn't to attack the office. That felt like trying to fight the ocean with a bucket. Instead, I started with a single piece of furniture in the kitchen. It's an old armchair, faded floral pattern, the one my wife, Helen, used to sit in while she did the crossword. For years after she was gone, it became a place for things that had no other home, a stack of mail, a book I meant to read, a sweater I took off and never put away. One morning, I looked at it and saw her old gardening gloves caked with dry soil, resting on top of a stack of unpaid bills. The sight of them, her practical, hard-working hands represented by those gloves, sitting on top of my own procrastination, it hit me like a physical blow. That chair wasn't a mess. It was a truth barometer, showing me exactly what parts of my life I was refusing to touch. I knew I couldn't just clean the chair. That would be like wiping a feverish brow and ignoring the illness. So I made a new rule for myself, the honest corner rule. I decided that this chair, this one small piece of my home, was no longer a place to dump things, but a place to diagnose them. I picked up each item one by one. The bills weren't just paper. They were a fear of facing my finances alone. The book wasn't just a book. It was a reminder of the quiet, focused man I used to be. And the gloves, they were the hardest. I held them in my hands, feeling the stiff, worn leather. I resisted the urge to just put them in a drawer. Instead, I took them out to the shed and hung them on the hook where they always belonged. It wasn't about being tidy. It was about giving things their proper ending. You learn that what you can't decide on simply reveals what you're not yet ready to face. My next battle was in the garage. This one felt more straightforward, less haunted by ghosts. It was just a place of pure, practical neglect. I was looking for a specific wrench to tighten a leaky faucet under the sink. I spent a half hour digging through old toolboxes, my knuckles getting scraped on rusty metal, the air smelling of oil and damp concrete. I pulled out a heavy red metal box, blew a cloud of dust off the top, and unlatched it. Inside, a perfect, gleaming set of socket wrenches still in their plastic molding. I'd completely forgotten I'd bought them. A few minutes later, in another chest, I found a second set, almost identical. And then, under a pile of old rags, I found a third, 3 of them. The cold, heavy feel of all that redundant steel in my hands was a perfect symbol for so much wasted time, energy, and money. It was a simple, almost foolish discovery, but it changed everything about how I brought new things into my home. The resistance was my old habit, the easy belief that buying a new tool was faster than finding the old one. But the cost of that speed was a garage full of duplicates and a mind full of fog. Now I have a new habit, one I call look before you keep. It applies to everything from a screwdriver to a bag of groceries. Before I put anything away, before it crosses the threshold of my house, I stop and ask a simple question. It's not about where it will go, it's about why it's here. I hold the item and ask myself, does this have a place in my life or just a place in my house? Have you ever bought something only to realize you already owned it? Tell me what it was in the comments. I bet I'm not the only one. The hardest part, of course, was Helen's things. Her clothes still hung in the closet, a silent congregation of fabrics and colors that were so essentially her. For 7 years, opening that door felt like a desecration. The thought of removing them, of creating an empty space where she once was unbearable. It felt like a betrayal, like the final act of forgetting. I knew I couldn't face it all at once. So I started something I called the weekly release ritual. The plan was simple, just one item every Sunday afternoon. Not to be thrown away, but to be thanked and let go. The first item was her favorite wool coat, a deep blue one she wore every winter. I took it off the hanger and just held it. I could still smell the faint, lingering scent of her perfume, a mix of lavender and something I could never name. I held it to my face and closed my eyes. I stood there for a long time, just holding that coat in the quiet of the bedroom. The resistance was immense. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to hang it back up, to close the door and pretend. But I knew that fortress of grief was keeping me a prisoner. So I took a deep breath and I spoke the words out loud to the empty room. "Thank you," I said to the coat. "Thank you for keeping her warm." It felt strange at first, talking to a piece of clothing. But as I said it, something shifted inside me. The act of giving it a voice, of acknowledging its story and its service, transformed the moment. It wasn't an act of discarding anymore. It became an act of closure. I folded it gently and placed it in the donation box. Letting go, I realized, isn't about erasure, it's about honoring what was. After that breakthrough, I realized my clutter wasn't just about grief or procrastination. It was also a form of isolation. That office Catherine had seen was my cave, a place I retreated to where no one could follow. I decided the only way to truly change it was to let people back in, so I asked my grandson, Leo, if he'd help me. Not to do the work for me, but just to be with me while I did it. I called it Organize with Not For. At first he was just excited to see what treasures he might find in Grandpa's messy office. He'd hold up an old fountain pen or a strange-looking paperweight and ask me its story. We weren't just clearing shelves, we were excavating my life together. The dust motes danced in the afternoon light pouring through the newly cleaned window, and for the first time in years, the room felt alive. The real change came when Leo started asking questions. We were going through a box of old photo albums, the pages stuck together with age, when he pointed to a picture of me and Helen on our wedding day. He just looked at it, then looked at me, and he laughed. A pure, uncomplicated laugh. The sound of it echoed in that dusty room, a sound that hadn't been heard in there for a decade. It was in that moment, sharing the stories behind the things, that the weight of the room began to lift. Later, he pulled out a heavy, ugly vase from a different box. "What's this for, Grandpa?" he asked. "A wedding gift from a distant relative, something I never liked but felt obligated to keep." I realized I was about to pass that obligation on to him. If you've ever kept a gift you hated out of guilt, just write "guilty" in the comments. We've all been there. That moment with the vase opened up a whole new category of clutter I hadn't even recognized. It was the clutter of guilt. I started looking around and seeing it everywhere. The set of fish knives we got from an aunt that we never once used because neither of us liked fish. The framed print of a sad-looking clown that a well-meaning friend gave me for my 50th birthday. For decades I had moved these things from house to house, dusted them, packed them, unpacked them, gave them space in my life, not because they brought me joy, but because I felt I owed it to the giver. The initial resistance to letting them go was powerful. It felt like I wasn't just getting rid of an object, but rejecting the person who gave it. It felt profoundly ungrateful. But as I finally carried that ugly vase to the donation box, a strange thing happened. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. A physical sensation of relief, as if a weight I didn't even know I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. I had spent 20 years dusting a piece of my own resentment. I realized that keeping an object out of a sense of obligation doesn't honor the person who gave it to you. It only punishes you, the keeper. The gift was in the act of giving, in the moment it was offered. That moment is long past. The object that remains is just a souvenir of that moment, and you don't have to let a souvenir dictate the layout of your home or your life forever. True gratitude, I learned, is a feeling you carry in your heart, not a storage requirement you have in your closet. It's a funny thing you learn when you start moving things around. You spend the first half of your life collecting, thinking you're building a life. And then, if you're lucky, you spend the second half looking at all of it and realizing you built a fortress instead, a fortress made of memories you were too afraid to forget and decisions you were too tired to make. Every dusty object is just another brick in that wall. And before you know it, you're the lonely king of a very quiet castle. You think you're just cleaning a garage or a closet. You're not. You're tearing down a wall, stone by stone. You're letting the light in, and you finally understand that your house isn't asking you to be tidy. That's never been the point. It's asking you to be present. It's asking you to stop living in the museum of who you were and to finally come home to the person you are right now. I've told you my story. Now let's talk about yours. You have a box, or a drawer, or maybe it's a whole room you keep the door closed to, a place you walk past quickly, and you tell yourself the same thing I did, that you'll get to it one day. But we both know the truth, don't we? It's not about the stuff. That clutter you're avoiding is a monument to a decision you haven't made. That pile of papers is a conversation you don't want to have. That piece of furniture you hate is a past you haven't let go of yet. You are not lazy. You are stuck. So here is my challenge to you. Not tomorrow, not next week. Right now, in the next 10 minutes after this video ends, I want you to go to that one spot. Don't you dare clean it. Don't organize a single thing. Just stand in front of it for 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and ask yourself one simple question out loud. What am I afraid of losing if I let this go? So that box, The one my grandson asked about, the one that sat in the corner by the window for 9 years, taping shut a piece of my own life. I finally did open it right after Catherine left that day, and what was inside? You're probably expecting some long-lost love letters or a secret I'd been keeping. The truth is, it held old tax receipts from 2008, a watch with a cracked face that stopped ticking a decade ago, a handful of dried-up pens. It was nothing, and it was everything, because I finally understood that the treasure was never going to be inside the box. The treasure was finding the courage to take a blade to the tape. Your house, your life. It isn't asking you to be tidy, it's just asking you to be present. If this conversation has been useful to you, maybe you'll subscribe to the channel. I'm still figuring all this out, and I would be so honored to have your company on the journey.